Whether you're in North or South Carolina or anywhere else in the world, enter the Cat Cave with Michael Davis, Ryan Frick, and Shannon Smith to listen to your favorite Carolina Panthers podcast, a part of the Keep Pounding Podcast Network and powered by the Fans First Sports Network. Guys, what's up? We are about 8 days away from the NFL draft taking place. So it's a super exciting time. You guys can follow us on our socials at the Cat Cave _ FFSN, and we'll probably post some of these mock drafts on social media so you guys can comment. But we've done one by one. I did the first week, I believe. Shannon did the second week. Ryan did the third week, and we kind of made it unfair on Ryan having him go back-to-back weeks. But now we've all taken what we've learned the last few weeks, and we've compiled our final mock draft. Next week, we're going to deep dive into what the Panthers really need to do. But here's what we think the Panthers should do. I'm going to start with my guy, Shannon, right here with your mock draft. And it will be displayed on the screen how this will go, as we have a lot of time to present our mock draft. And then we can have quick rebuttals from the rest of the co-hosts. So, Shannon, take it away.
All right, so let's go ahead and go with these picks. So you want them just like all my picks, not just going from round to round, all of us, just every single one of them, right?
Yeah, every single one of them.
Cool. All right, so I think that all of us agree that Carolina needs the receiver position, like a revamping of the receiver position. And I think looking at you guys as well too, y'all picked receivers as your first picks. Me, I went with Keon Coleman, which has been the guy that they thought that Carolina should take. Or, I've read some articles in Sports Illustrated saying that Keon Coleman is the guy to be picked. 6'4", 215-pounder from Florida State. Big receiver, pro build, like a wide receiver in the NFL. 50 catches, 658 yards, 11 touchdowns on last year. Played with a very good Florida State squad that fell short in ACC. They fell short getting in their bowl game. They won the ACC championship. Outside of that, for the national championship tournament. It's all good. It is what it is. They had a good career. Then my next pick for my next pick, which is our back-to-back pick, I went with Zach Frazier. Zach Frazier. We need a center. The center position needs to be filled by the Carolina Panthers. Zach Frazier is the obvious guy. I thought about taking him first. I thought about it, but once again, you got to fill that receiver spot. But the center spot has to be filled as well too. 6'3", 310-pounder, two-time All-American, 21 and 23, three-time Big 12 pick. He was a first-teamer twice. 47 career starts. No, 46 career starts, 47 career games. Sorry about that. 37 straight starts at center. Allowed 4 sacks in 3 years and allowed no sacks last year. I think he's the obvious guy for that center spot that we need for rebuilding. Then with the next pick, I go with Chris Jenkins, the defensive lineman from Michigan, 6'3", 305-pounder. Started off 15 games, 37 tackles, 4.5 tackles for losses, 2.5 sacks, and 1 interception this year. All Big Ten second teamer this year on that national championship Michigan Wolverines squad. Then my next pick after him was Kyrie Jackson, the cornerback from Oregon. Big guy, 6'3", 195-pounder, very lengthy, great size, likes to press, very good tackler at the cornerback spot. All Pac-12 first teamer, 12 starts, 34 tackles, 5 tackles for losses, 2 sacks, 3 picks, and 7 passes deflected this year. I think he would be great for our defensive backfield. Also a good special teamer. Then with the next pick, Ryan, I thought about you on this one, but I picked Marshawn Lloyd, the running back, who was with the other USC, but he played years.
That's right. He is with the other USC. Mike, you silence yourself. He was with the other USC last season.
I knew I would stir this pot right here. I knew I would stir it. That's what I needed to do. So, yes, I went with him, 5'9", 210-pounder, 21 games, 8 starts, 801 yards, 175 carries, 10 touchdowns this year, 12 total touchdowns on the year. I think the running back position is something that Carolina can grow with. Although we know Chuba probably will be the number one guy. we got to look for a third and look for some depth at that running back position. Then with my next pick, I go with Christian Jones, offensive tackle. Needed to fill out that offensive tackle spot. That offensive line needs a lot of work. So I think Christian Jones, big guy, would be wonderful in that tackle spot. Put him on that left, put him on that blind side spot. And then my very last pick, my 7th rounder, J.D. Bertrand, linebacker. Once again, filling slots on that defense. We had a very good free agency with the linebackers that we signed in free agency. Once again, the draft is where you got to build. I think JD would be a good addition to the linebacking core and also to that special teams, because field position is going to be very, very important. And that rounds it out, guys.
Yeah, listen, I like a lot of your picks, right? I'm not a huge fan of the wide receiver you took, only because there's a sense. First of all, the last wide receiver from Florida State that was drafted by the Panthers was Kelvin Benjamin, and he didn't seem to work out all that well. Not to mention the fact that like this Florida State squad was so entitled that half the team left when they didn't make the playoff. You can argue about what you want to. Georgia had a point to prove, and they did by waxing the floor with Florida State in the bowl game. So I'm not really sure. Last week I took Jaheim Bell in my draft as a former Florida State Seminole, but I also took him super late because I don't know what he's going to be utilized in the NFL. So I like that pick. I mean, everything else sort of makes sense. Last week I took Marshawn Lloyd in my draft, so that pick makes sense. You can't go wrong with offensive linemen when the problem that the Panthers had last year was pass protection. So I dig your draft, man. I see where you were coming from, and I don't disagree with a lot of it.
Yeah, and I think Zach Frazier was a really solid pick. I did some research on him when I was writing stuff for Fans First Sports Network, and Frazier started 47 games at West Virginia. He's really regarded as a pro-rated prospect. He has all the tools, like possessing strength, athleticism. Mentally, he has a lot of awareness and toughness. I think whoever gets Zach Frazier might get the best offensive lineman in this draft. So the Panthers, if they get him at 39, that is a steal. Ryan, you mentioned taking Marshawn Lloyd, who went to the real USC this past
No. South Carolina, the University of South Carolina was a university before California was a state. Therefore, we are the original USC. Miss me with that nonsense, Michael.
Look at that.
I'm not going to have this one.
Look at that history. That was good. I like
Shannon, there's a reason when we say USC, what do we think of? We think of the real
You all might think of whoever
USC.
you want. When I hear USC, I think South Carolina. That's your problem.
And say that I think of Southern Cal. I think that was an ESPN thing over the years, calling them USC. I've known South Carolina as USC, and I've known Southern Cal as USC, but I've known South Carolina as USC for longer than I've known Southern Cal as USC. So,
I'm just
read
saying.
Between the lines, Michael. Read between the lines, okay? That's
we're
right
keeping
there
it PG on the video feed.
You're welcome.
Hey, we'll debate that on another time. But Ryan, did you take Marshawn Lloyd this time around with your mock draft?
I didn't. So I probably caught a lot of flack last week for homering my draft up. So I tried to change it up when I did it this week. I did stick with Xavier Worthy as my number one pick at wide receiver. I can't think of the guy's name, but there was the opportunity to take the guy from Georgia. Xavier Legette was still there. There were some other wide receivers there, but the other guys felt more like a potential alternate for Adam Thielen, so that's why I went with Worthy. Worthy can be decent in the return game. They've changed the kickoff rules where you're going to have kick returns this year. So I like Worthy's opportunity to get open in space and take some kickoff returns deep for the Panthers this year. And again, with that draft record speed, you can't go wrong. I know you've got some concerns with his hands, but I stuck with him as my first pick. Now, what I did do differently than what I did last week was I didn't go wide receiver in my back-to-back picks here at 33 and 39. I decided to go with an interior offensive lineman in Jackson Powers Johnson. we talked about Oregon and what they were able to do on offense. They were able to protect Bo Nix, is why Bo Nix looked so good this year at Oregon, when Bo Nix was running for his life at Auburn and didn't really look like a great quarterback. And now people are considering Bo Nix to be a first-round quarterback pick, which is crazy to me, because he's just not that guy. You can look at his measurables, you can look at his stats, but I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that Oregon's got a good offensive line play. And so taking Jackson Powers Johnson out of Oregon is why I went there with my second pick. I did not go Marshawn Lloyd with this mock draft, because I went with arguably one of the best running backs in this draft, if not, you could argue that he is the best running back in the draft, even though he's listed pretty low on the list. And that's Blake Corum out of Michigan. Like, all Michigan did against everybody they played was run the football. Who was the number one running back in Michigan? Blake Corum. We talked about the fact that I think Miles Sanders' days, even though he signed that contract last offseason, I don't know if he lasts long-term here in Carolina. Chuba Hubbard's going to have someone in the backfield to go along with him that fits the style of play that we want to run in Carolina. So I like Blake Corum to do that. And honestly, we don't know how long Chuba Hubbard's going to stick around. I believe he's getting towards the end of his contract, and seeing how absolutely poorly our owner has been able to put together a real roster around Chuba Hubbard. There's a reason why Deontay Foreman left when he was the feature back, after one season with Carolina when Christian McCaffrey was traded away. So I like Blake Corum to come in and fill that spot and potentially be that next superstar running back that Carolina has. That's to be seen what he can do in the NFL. But that's why I went with Blake Corum. And then I started sort of tackling like needs, like in this draft. So with my next pick, I took a cornerback. He was the best available cornerback in the draft when I was looking at the draft board, in Chris Abrams-Drain. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. A defensive back out of Missouri. Now, Missouri has not been good in football as a whole the last couple of years, but they have been able to put some individual players that are pretty decent into the NFL. And so I kind of banked on the fact that this is another one of those guys. And again, Shannon talked about it. We need to bolster this defensive backfield. We don't know if J.C. Horn is going to be able to stay healthy. Stephon Gilmore, as far as I'm concerned, as recording the show, is still not decided to sign with the Carolina Panthers, or anyone for that matter. So we don't know what the backfield is going to look like going in to the draft. So that's why I decided to go cornerback as well. And then Wake Forest safety Malik Mustafa as my next pick. Similar situation. Listen, you could talk about corners and different spots in the defensive backfield. We need some help defending the pass, defending the deep pass. We've got some guys that we brought in to replace, and we've talked about it almost every show seemingly since they were gone. With the loss of Frankie Louvu and Brian Burns, we've replaced them with some guys that we think can get after the passer and put pressure on the quarterback. But on the backside of that, if you can get pressure on the quarterback to force him into some errant throws, the backfield is what kind of shores that up. So I like Malik Mustafa here at pick 141. And in the very next pick, I decided to go back with what I did last week in Jaheim Bell. Again, once the departure of Hayden Hurst was made known, I know they're talking about keeping the rest of the tight ends on staff, but Jaheim Bell, at least at South Carolina, was a Swiss Army knife in his 2 years in South Carolina. I mentioned it last week. The last time he played at Bank of America Stadium, 5 catches, 165 yards, and 2 touchdowns, playing against North Carolina in the Dukes Mayo Bowl a couple years back. So he knows what it's like to find success in Charlotte. When he's been given the opportunity, when he's been able to stay healthy, he's been able to do everything. I mean, you talk about guys like Taysom Hill over in New Orleans. The guy's lines up at tight end. He's listed as a tight end on the roster, but he's started at quarterback multiple times for the New Orleans Saints, which has been great for fantasy football players to throw a quarterback in your tight end slot. But Taysom Hill is a multi-talented playmaker in the NFL. And so I think Jaheim Bell can still do that, given the opportunity with a decent enough team. And so that's why I went with him. And then again, I mentioned, I just talked about it. Shannon mentioned it. You can't get enough offensive line help. And so in my last pick, I took Caden Wallace, an offensive tackle out of Penn State. Penn State, again, they haven't won a Big Ten championship They haven't made a college football playoff, but it's because they play in a conference with both Michigan and Ohio State, who are always in the top 4 going into their matchup every single season. And so an offensive lineman from Penn State that late in the draft. I mean, listen, if with this offensive line that we're coming from, we've obviously signed some guys in the offseason we talked about here on the show, but you can't have enough offensive line help. And if he works out and he turns out to be a starter at some point, cool. If he doesn't, he'll be a practice squad guy, or he's a 7th rounder at that point. Like it's you take a flyer on an offensive lineman. I'm not sure you can really go wrong. I mean, you could have taken a quarterback at that point if you wanted to. So that's why I went with offensive tackle, and that is my second mock draft here on the Cat Cave. Mike, I'll send it back to you.
Yeah, that was pretty solid, honestly. And I want to get Shannon's thoughts here, but Shannon got Zach Frazier, and you got Jackson Powers Johnson at pick 39. And if either of those guys drop to Carolina at 39, you absolutely have to take them. Like that is a solid pick, and that could work out really well for Carolina. I personally think Blake Corum is going to end up with the Chargers, especially since Harbaugh is now there and they let Austin Eckler walk to Washington. Shannon,
hold on, time out. I just need to say something, and I don't mean to cut you off, and I don't mean to get off topic here. But Jim Harbaugh has been very adamant about how good J.J. McCarthy is. He is trying to force feed people into going to draft J.J. McCarthy. I'm going to say it right here, and I may have said it already on the show, but why don't you put your money where your mouth is, Jim Harbaugh? Why don't y'all trade away Justin Herbert, get some draft capital, trade away Justin Herbert, and you go draft J.J. McCarthy? Are you scared, Jim Harbaugh? Go do it. If he's so good and you think you can build an offense around J.J. McCarthy, why don't you trade away the man that made so much money in Los Angeles and Justin Herbert? Let him go start for someone like Minnesota or someone like Atlanta. Trade him away and you start J.J. McCarthy. Otherwise, and I hate to use this phrase, but I can't think of anything else on the top of my head, quit pimping out J.J. McCarthy and go get him yourself. I'm tired of hearing it, man. If J.J. McCarthy is so good, you draft him. You draft him, man.
I mean, that is a take for sure. Wow. Yeah, that would be quite the draft move. Now, Shannon, we didn't allow any big draft day trades in our mock drafts. We wanted to keep it pretty standard. When you look at Ryan's mock draft, what are your overall thoughts? If this was the Panthers draft, would you like it?
I would. I definitely like the Jackson Powers Johnson draft pick. I think that's probably that back-to-back pick, that second pick that we get in the second round. We have to get that right. That's the one I feel like we have to get that right. The first pick in that second round, that's cool. I mean, I like that, and that's a very good starting point. But when we circle back and go to that pick right after that one, that's the pick to me is going to be the guy that's going to be the one that's going to be the make or break pick, I believe, in my opinion. That's the one Carolina has to get it right. If Zach Frazier or Jackson Powers Johnson is there, get him. You have to. Don't mess this one up. Don't screw this one up. Blake Corum, I think, is a sleeper. I really think he's a sleeper running back. He was the best running back in the nation. I got to give credit where credit is due. I didn't see anybody better than him, especially with the repetitions and all that he had on a championship team. I'm really, really going to be biting my nails on which receiver that Carolina takes. If they take a receiver with that first pick, Worthy, I don't think you can go wrong with Worthy. I don't think you can. Use them in the kick return. Use them in the return game. Very, very good. The Mustafa pick, I think I liked a lot too. You got to fill needs, and that's one thing that Ryan did that I liked.
And he's a North Carolina kid. He's from Wake Forest.
Exactly.
He's right down the road, man.
He
went appealing to that hometown crowd.
And you went for the guys, and what I liked about it, Ryan, is you went for the guys that were the can't miss guys. and you're 1 and 2 picks, and then you fill needs, which was great, which is what you should do in the draft. Seriously, good
Yeah,
stuff.
and especially with like there's always the debate to take, a team need or best player available, and I think Ryan did a exceptional job. And I'm glad we didn't see any South Carolina guys. I mean, not hating, guys like Xavier Legette, but it's a little bit different. It's a different pace for Ryan. And so I was thinking back to our mock drafts, and it's pretty consistent that a lot of Panthers fans want a wide receiver and offensive lineman. And so for my mock draft, I went a little different approach, okay? Because the Panthers have traded for Deontay Johnson. Panthers' big free agent signs were Damian Lewis and Robert Hunt on the offensive line. Maybe they give Akeem Ekwonu another chance. Okay, well, you filled the receiver, you filled the offensive line. I'm looking at the defense. You just trade away Brian Burns for the 39th overall pick. Your secondary is really, really thin when it comes to injuries. Just can't stay healthy. So I'm going to take a different approach here, and I'm going to go defense in the first 2 picks. I'm going to go take Kamari Lassiter, the corner from Georgia, with the 33rd overall pick. Ryan, I'm not hating on your South Carolina guys, but when it comes to JC Horn, he just can't stay healthy right now.
Yeah.
It's very unfortunate because he's super talented. Horn's super talented. He could be one of the top corners in the game, but he's just not happening. So I looked and I was like, okay, let me take a corner with that first pick, and maybe that can allow Horn to rest on some plays and stay healthy. And then 39th overall, I don't take Chop Robinson, because Chop is not on the board at this point. You know why? Because he slipped up into the first round in this mock draft, like I predicted on the show about a couple months ago. So I'm going to go take another edge rusher, last name Robinson. This guy from Mizzou, Darius Robinson. Okay, you pair him with Jadeveon Clowney. That way, Jadeveon Clowney's not getting double teamed. You just re-signed Derek Brown, put Darius Robinson on the end, and you got it. The 3rd round pick, I actually kept the same for my original mock draft. I'm going to still take Jadavian Sanders, the tight end from Texas. Especially Ryan mentioned, the Panthers losing former Gamecock Hayden Hurst. You got to give Bryce Young a security blanket. Yes, you have Deontay Johnson. Yes, you have Adam Thielen. Yes, you have Jonathan Mingo, but you need a tight end. When it's 3rd and 4, you need somebody you can rely on. I think that's Sanders. The 4th round pick, 101 overall, I'm going to get Jermaine Burton, the wide receiver from Alabama, because everybody knows Alabama is wide receiver U. Just look at the people who have came through there. Amari Cooper, Calvin Ridley. I mean, the list can go on.
No, LSU has an argument to make there. Sorry. Just saying.
Right.
Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. No, T. Higgins with Clemson. Yeah. I'm just going to throw that out there. You did not interrupt our mock drafts. I interrupted yours. I sincerely apologize. I just had to throw that out there.
It's okay. You can disagree, but when you look at Amari Cooper, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, who just got a contract extension this week. We talked about him yesterday on Out of Pocket. Julio Jones, Jerry Jeudy. There's so many guys to where it's like it's lined up. LSU has an argument there, but if the Panthers got Jermaine Burton at pick 101, like,
I love it. I love getting to that late. Yeah, I'm with. Listen, I get your logic. I've been saying it a lot this week. Like, I understand the why. I understand why you took him, and it's not a bad pick.
No.
But when you've got guys like T. Higgins, DeAndre Hopkins, what can I say his name? Sammy Watkins, that was great for a few years. Clemson had an argument to make to be wide receiver U than LSU did. So I wanted to play the devil's advocate here and interrupt you when you called Alabama wide receiver U, because Alabama does have a ton of phenomenal wide receivers that have had stellar careers in the NFL. But I just want to throw that out there. Like, you go upset some people, and I hope you're ready for it. So
I mean, it's fair. And if Jermaine Burton doesn't work out 101, I wasn't going to do this. But I saw at 141, Brendan Rice, the son of probably the greatest wide receiver of all time, Jerry Rice, is available at 141. Why not take the flyer and get the receiver from the real USC and see if he pans out to be anything like his dad? You would have to get Brendan Rice 141 overall. And then when you look at the Panthers having back-to-back picks at 141 and 142, I would have to say that the Panthers should be taking Christian Jones, the offensive tackle from Texas. That's where you get some offensive line depth late in the draft. Again, he may be a practice squad guy. Who knows? And then at 240, I'm going JD Bertrand. I believe Shannon, actually, yeah, I think Shannon picked up. I was actually looking at my old mock draft.
Yeah.
I was looking at my
old seeing the names. If you're watching the YouTube channel, you're like, there's two different names that you got on there. So Michael Goof, that's okay. We've still got some time. You can correct yourself, bud.
I was like, okay, so a few weeks ago, I was taking JT Bertrand. I was like, that's a good pick. And then I was like, wait a minute. I picked Roger Rosengarten from the offensive tackle from Washington. The offensive line depth is still there at 142. And then 240, instead of taking a linebacker like I did last time from Notre Dame, I'm taking somebody who ruined App State's defense over in Troy. I'm taking Kamani Vidal. Vidal is a solid running back. He's a little smaller, but especially getting him as late as you could would be a solid pick, especially when we mentioned, the Panthers really need a running back. I didn't have them taking Blake Corum. I didn't take them, Marshawn Lloyd, but getting Vidal in the last pick of the NFL draft for the Panthers would be pretty solid. I know Ryan commented a little bit. Shannon, what do you think of my draft? Real quick, good or bad with this approach?
It's a different approach because, when you draft like this, it all comes into the identity of what you want here. And you went with the identity of going for the defense. And that was something that you wanted, was the defense, to work on the defense. And that's not a bad strategy. I do like the fact that you did pick the receivers in the middle. When you picked the guy from Alabama, you picked Brendan Rice. I like that because, it's kind of like how Washington did with quarterbacks. They took RG3 and then they turned around and took Kirk Cousins later on. And everybody was wondering, why in the world did you do that? And then later on, it panned out differently for the both of them. So I do like that idea. I like the ideology that you had. It was very, very good. I liked the Jadavian Sanders pick. I like that pick. I was really on the fence about drafting him in the third round. I was really on the fence about doing that because he's a good tight end, very, very good tight end. So I like that pick real well. So all in all, MD, I gotta give you credit. Good stuff. Right. I wouldn't have went that because I wouldn't want to miss on somebody like Zach Frazier or JPJ. But I can dig that. I can dig it. Sucker.
All right, Ryan. Good or bad draft going defense first?
I know we're short on time, so I'll make it short and quick. I didn't hate it, but I also didn't like it. The strength of this team was the defense. They've addressed that defense continuously in the offseason with the free agency. I didn't think you needed to go defensive heavy so early. I like I gave you a hard time about making fun of Alabama being a wide receiver. I liked your pick at wide receiver there. I didn't like the pick from the real USC. My concern is the same concern that I have for Marvin Harrison Jr. Is he going to be the next Jerry Rice, or is he going to be the son of Michael Jordan that never did anything? He's going to be Bronny James, who averaged 4 points a game at Southern Cal
and going to the transfer portal and going to the transfer portal for what?
Yeah, and did not only enter the transfer portal, but declared for the NBA draft to see if anybody's going to be. No, nobody's going to worry about that stuff. So. And then Kamani Vidal, I know he probably upset you about what he did to App State, but a running back from Troy playing in that conference, undersized. I'm sure he's a great guy, and I'm sure he's a phenomenal football player. But I think there's a couple other places. If you're not going to go wide or running back until that late, there's plenty of other guys that you can draft with the last pick in the draft. There's going to be, I mean, Vidal could have still been available after the draft was over, and you could have got him, signed him as an undrafted free agent. So, I mean, I didn't hate your draft. I loved the Jermaine Burton pick at 101. I liked the Brendan Rice pick at 141. You addressed a couple needs, so it was a different approach, and that's, I think, why you landed on some of the guys you did. But there's room for improvement, and there's when you flip flop on a offensive lineman from Washington or the linebacker that you took in the last draft that you did, when you get mixed up a little bit, I can see how it's not so. Let's just say I'm glad that you're not. Why can I say the new GM's name? I'm glad that you're not our new general manager making decisions here. Dan Morgan. Yeah, I'm glad that your name is Michael Davis and not Dan Morgan, because I think that the Carolina Panthers are in a little bit better situation here with Dan Morgan running the show than Mr. Out of Pocket himself, Mr. Drop the Mic, Mr. Michael Davis.
Well, with that said, the people can vote on our mock drafts. This was our final round of mock drafts. You'll be able to vote in them on our social media accounts, but you can go follow us at the Cat Cave _FFSN. Those are pretty solid. You see our Twitter handles on the screen as well. Ryan at Tapouts and TDs, myself at B_Michael Davis, Shannon at podcast_Smee. That's where you can find us on Twitter and X. But next week, we're going to talk about really what the Panthers need to do in our final draft analysis. Maybe some big breaking news breaks over the next week. We'll see what happens. But until then, exit the Cat Cave, but listen to more of our content on the Tobacco Road Sports Radio's YouTube channel and the Fans First Sports Network audio feed. And until next time, myself, Michael Davis, Ryan Frick, Shannon Smith, and we'll see you next week here in the Cat Cave.